but underpinning that is always the finances. Without a strong financial position, the rest of this becomes just a lot of wishful thinking. So everything that you see that I will do on this board, as well as my capacity on the Oak Harbor City Council, I focus heavily on the finance side of it. And I'm always looking for a balance between what we as a community can afford and what we can provide. It's pretty simple, as we all do in our own households. I served in the military. I was an infantry officer in an airborne unit, and I was no hero. I just did what everybody else was doing during that time. And I graduated from the University of Washington, where go Dogs, I see that. And my background is from the UW is in construction management and business. So in a nutshell, that's where I am.
Thank you.
And I also raised our kids on the island too. We have 6 kids, and education was a big focus for them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for asking. Any other comments, responses to public comments before we move along?
There were a couple of comments about the radios. Last month, there was some discussion about the radio repeaters, and a comment was made that they were backup for law enforcement. And that's what I took issue with, was that was serving as a backup. It is not serving as a backup. These would be radio repeaters on its own frequency that ICOM can hear. So ICOM can access it, ICOM can monitor it to know if there's a situation and could deploy support. But it isn't a system where if, for example, the sheriff's first system went down, that they would use Island Transit as a backup system. The sheriff's department has other systems that it would use as a backup system. And there was a presentation to the Board of County Commissioners about how the sheriff's department is moving to this digital system, which is somewhat true. However, in that presentation we were given as commissioners, there was misinformation presented that it was not going to be compatible with any other system. It will still work with ICOM, and ICOM can link the systems together through its servers. So I just wanted to clarify, because I did also see some emails that went around about it. And again, my particular issue with radios is every time we're asked to fund a radio system, we are told that it is to back up law enforcement. And it is, in fact, not always true with every repeater system. And so what I'm trying to force is some vocabulary accuracy around that. This is a system designed for Island Transit that can be heard by ICOM, but it is a system for the transit. It has nothing to do with law enforcement. That's really what my issue was. And then I did have some comments on the 411 also, unless anybody else wanted to talk about the radios. So on the 411, I had a question about, I thought the 411 was a state grant, not a federal grant, so I'm going to need some clarification on that. And then also, I understand the concerns about blaming it on the state, certainly. However, I also want to point out that connector services are funded in other transit organizations by the state as well. So Skagit Transit has a request in for their portion of connector services. And it is not unusual for a transit system to request matching dollars for that connectivity piece. What is the other piece of this is, and this is probably something we'll talk about a little bit more as we go along, but Island Transit, the smallest transit system in our particular region, is driving into other counties to connect. When the cost per dollar for Skagit to connect with us or Snohomish to connect with us is less. So it is interesting that the requirement is on us to connect with them, and there's not more pressure on them to connect with us. I think that that's one of the conversations that has to happen, but those are longer term solutions and discussions that need to start, and in the interim, really where we're at is if we want this service to continue, we're going to need funding from the state to help that. There's a budget that everybody, most people here have seen, and it's clear in there that the budget capacity doesn't exist to continue that service at the cost that it is right now without that state, the state's help. as it stands to my understanding, we did not make a request for that funding last year when they were asking for a funding amount because we didn't have the match portion. We do have a request in right now for the full amount of the funding for that route, with some conditions that we would look at ways to generate additional revenue in order to not maybe take full advantage of that grant allotment. And so it's in flux. I don't know how much political support there is for it down in Olympia. It certainly is a concern. But I think part of the reason the state's involved in this conversation about regional connectors is that they cross county lines. It is part of a statewide system of connecting one person on transit to another system of transit, and that interconnectivity, that regional connectivity, supersedes each individual county's roles, and so the state intervenes to help those connections happen. That's my research in the last month has turned up.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we will get on item number 4, we'll get into more detail about some of these comments too. Mr. Hammond.
Oh, I was just going to piggyback on Jill there. As far as, yes, there is, it's my understanding there is a request in for funding for the 411 as well as the Everett connector. It has been put forth by Dave Hayes, but it's also my understanding, because this is going to go to the Senate committee, that not only us as a board, but the public, it would be a great deal of assistance, because what I understand, Senator Bailey is hesitant about supporting any request for funding simply because of a lack of confidence in the ability of Island Transit. So I think what we need to do is put forth part of where our long-range goals are, what we have done already, and we as a board try to put something together and get with Senator Bailey, speak with her as far as this is what we've done, this is where our plan is, we have a working plan, and I believe that a huge part of that conversation with the Senator needs to be the fact that Island Transit is looking for ways to be more self-sufficient in funding as well. Whether it be advertising, whether it be fares, whether it be a combination of both, which would, I think, we need to show that we're being proactive if we're going to get their support and to get these grants, to get this funding, we're going to need their support.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Let me segue onto that comment too. Jill, I know you've been in contact with Representative Hayes, so have I, and maybe you have too, Mr. Hammond. But he is working on that. Dave Hayes he's on the transportation committee, and there's no promise about what's going to happen. He's made that clear too. I think he would much rather under-promise and over-deliver than just the other way around. But he is definitely working on it because it is an issue that affects the financial stabilization of our operation for both finance and service. Any other comments? No further comments. Those are response to the public comments. The public comment period is now closed, and we will move on with the executive director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item on my agenda is a financial report from Paul Aaron, who will provide a summary update of where we are at this point in the year.
Okay, thank you. If I could just turn your direction to the financial packet that was provided a couple days ago to all the board members. The first item in that packet is a cash summary report. It shows a cash balance at the end of January of $923,746. It's slightly down from December 31st, partly due to sales tax revenue that was less than we anticipated, which was counterbalanced by some expenses as well that were less than we forecasted. So in relation to what we we're projecting, we're down about I think it was $14,000 from our projection. Of course, these are sales tax, of course, is a variable. It goes down in January, could be up in February. So one thing about sales tax is it lags about 2 months from what happens in the sales world. So that's just what happened. And so we're down about 14,000 from where I was projecting. Next sheet is a graph that just displays the changes in the timing of our receipts and expenditures. In terms of revenues and expenditures, inflows and outflows, for the month of January, we show a $77,000 surplus of our revenues versus expenditures. Some of the differences between what we're spending actual cash and what we're showing revenues and expenditures has to do with just the timing of the payments. But we're showing a surplus situation in January, which is a good thing. Let's see. Other than that, the Finance Committee did discuss this morning a lot of different elements. We've also had some meetings between various commissioners, myself and the director, about a 2-year plan, where we're headed, and looking at items like how we're using our money, capital expenditures, items that we've been talking a little bit about here in the public forum, and cash flow. And so we took all those items and we have been discussing those for the past couple weeks, and we were even talking about a number of these items this morning. I guess the other two things I would like to mention would be our operations report, which I've changed slightly, added some pieces of information to it, and with the call that we had to take a look at statewide operating statistics that's published each year. I also included a copy of that in the board packet for your use. Just take a look statewide and see how all the other agencies are reporting and performing. The one thing I'd like to mention about that statewide report is that when talking with the individual who prepared that report each year, who prepares that report each year and has done so for many years, he stated that although it is a comparison document, don't use it to try and exactly compare agencies, because their operations are very different and they're in different communities, and there's so many variables that direct comparisons are probably not appropriate. But it is a good source of information, and I've included it in the board packet. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding the report?
With the $14,000 revenues below projections, how long do you watch that before you would recommend behavioral changes on the expense side?
I think, after about 2 or 3 months that would form as a small trend, I think we would really need to start seriously talking about what the future brings. The sales tax was down again this in February. I definitely talked to the director about it, and I would leave it up to the director to decide whether whether to bring that up to the board for any kind of recommended service changes. But it's a moving target. It's a variable that we don't really have any control over, and we definitely need to take action if we judge that it's a real trend and really significant. But if sales tax is down 1 month and up the next month, I'm not sure that we want to do the same. Take our service down 1 month, put it back up in this month. We can't react that way.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? I have a question for you. On the January 2015 summary, under the cash on hand on 12/31/14.
That's an error, it should be 15.
uh,
Oh, no,
Yeah. No,
the date's wrong, I mean, I'm sorry.
down at the cash on hand?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That answers my question, because the math didn't work on the right side of that column. It was about a $30,000 difference. Any other questions? I have just a comment. Well, let me go back to Ms. Lauderdale's question. What's the timing on getting the financial reports out online electronically? Is there a glitch on? We don't have glitches. We have a date that we're going to produce this, and the public needs to know that in advance. So give me some kind of a narrative on the timing.